You are working alongside someone who seems extraordinarily charismatic. Get this, the colleague everyone admires, the manager who exudes confidence, the friend who always knows exactly what to say. They're charming, persuasive, and seemingly successful, but beneath that polished exterior lurks something far more sinister, a complete absence of empathy, a calculated approach to manipulation, and a willingness to destroy anyone who stands in their way. This isn't the plot of a psychological thriller. This is psychopathy, a personality disorder that affects approximately 1% of the general population. That may sound like a small number until you consider what it really means. In a city of 1 million people, roughly 10,000 psychopaths walk among us. In your workplace of 200 employees, statistically 2 might meet the clinical criteria. And here's the truly unsettling part. Psychopathy is significantly more prevalent in corporate environments, with studies showing rates as high as 12 to 13% in organizational settings. Unlike the serial killers popularized in media, most psychopaths never commit violent crimes. Instead, they operate in boardrooms, social circles, and even intimate relationships, leaving trails of psychological and financial devastation without ever breaking the law. They're not necessarily violent, but they are universally destructive to those around them. The cost of psychopathy extends far beyond individual suffering. Research estimates it costs the criminal justice system approximately $460 billion annually, making it the most expensive mental health disorder in existence. But the human cost, destroyed careers, shattered families, traumatized colleagues, can't be quantified in dollars. Today, we're diving deep into the science of psychopathy. We'll explore the validated traits that define this condition, the subtle warning signs that emerge in everyday interactions, and most critically, how to protect yourself before you become another casualty. This isn't about paranoia, it's about informed awareness that could save your career, your relationships, and your mental health. Understanding psychopathy, the scientific foundation. Before we can identify psychopaths, we need to understand what psychopathy actually is and what it isn't. Psychopathy represents a constellation of personality traits and behaviors that fundamentally differ from typical human psychological functioning. It's not simply being mean, selfish, or difficult. It's a specific pattern of traits that, when combined, create something genuinely dangerous. The gold standard for assessing psychopathy is the Psychopathy Checklist Revised, commonly known as the PCLR. Developed by Canadian psychologist Robert Hare, this 20-item clinical rating scale has become the definitive tool for identifying psychopathy in both research and forensic settings. Each item reflects a different symptom or characteristic, rated on a 3-point scale based on lifetime functioning, not just current state. The PCLR doesn't measure a single trait, but rather assesses 2 distinct yet related dimensions. Factor 1 captures what researchers call the interpersonal affective features, the personality characteristics that define the psychopath's inner world. This includes superficial charm, grandiose sense of self-worth, pathological lying, cunning and manipulative behavior, lack of remorse or guilt, shallow emotional responses, callousness and lack of empathy, and failure to accept responsibility. Factor 2 measures the lifestyle antisocial features, the behavioral manifestations of the disorder. This dimension includes need for stimulation and proneness to boredom, parasitic lifestyle, poor behavioral controls, early behavioral problems, lack of realistic long-term goals, impulsivity, irresponsibility, juvenile delinquency, and criminal versatility. A score of 30 or above out of a possible 40 indicates psychopathy. For context, the average person scores around 5. Most prisoners score in the low 20s. Only those who score 30 or higher meet the clinical threshold, and these individuals are fundamentally different from the general population in ways that matter profoundly. Research using the PCLR reveals that when assessed using this rigorous standard, only about 1.2% of the general population meets criteria for psychopathy. However, this prevalence varies dramatically depending on the population studied. In community samples, prevalence sits around 1.9%. In university students, it rises to 8.1%. And in organizational settings, particularly at senior levels, it skyrockets to approximately 12.9%. This dramatic increase in corporate environments isn't coincidental. The traits that define psychopathy, superficial charm, confidence bordering on grandiosity, ruthlessness, focus on personal gain, absence of guilt, can actually facilitate climbing the corporate ladder. In environments that reward aggressive competition, risk-taking, and single-minded pursuit of success, psychopathic traits may be inadvertently selected for rather than against. What makes psychopathy particularly dangerous is that it's not a deficit disorder like depression or anxiety, where something is missing or malfunctioning in a way that causes the person distress. Psychopaths don't suffer from their condition. They don't feel the absence of empathy as a loss. In fact, many researchers describe psychopathy not as a disorder, but as a different adaptive strategy, one that prioritizes personal gain and survival at the expense of genuine human connection.
The core traits. What defines a psychopath? When forensic mental health professionals were asked to rank the 20 PCLR items by importance to psychopathy, 3 traits emerged as absolutely central: lack of empathy, being conning and manipulative, and absence of remorse or guilt. These 3 characteristics form the emotional core of psychopathy and are the features most consistently recognized by experts as defining the condition. Lack of empathy represents more than simple callousness. Psychopaths fundamentally cannot experience genuine emotional connection to others' suffering. While they can intellectually understand that someone is in pain, they can recognize the signs and even predict how people will react. They don't feel moved by it. Your tears don't affect them except as information they might exploit. Your joy doesn't bring them genuine happiness. You are, in the most literal sense, an object to them rather than a person with inherent worth. This doesn't mean psychopaths appear cold or robotic. Many are remarkably skilled at mimicking emotional responses. They've learned through observation which facial expressions, tone of voice, and words create the appearance of caring. But it's performance, not genuine feeling. Think of it as someone fluent in a language they don't actually understand. They can say the right words in the right order, but there's no comprehension beneath the surface. The manipulative nature of psychopaths flows directly from this emotional detachment. Because they view people as objects or tools rather than as beings with inherent value, manipulation feels no different to them than using a hammer to drive a nail. They're simply deploying the right tool for the desired outcome. Lying, deceiving, exploiting vulnerabilities, none of this generates guilt or hesitation because the target's humanity doesn't register as morally relevant. This manipulation is particularly dangerous because psychopaths are often exceptionally skilled at it. They've spent their lives observing human behavior, learning to mimic emotions they don't feel, and identifying what makes people tick. Many possess above-average intelligence and use it to craft personas that appeal to specific targets. They're not mindlessly manipulative, they're strategically, calculatedly manipulative. The absence of remorse or guilt means there's no internal brake on harmful behavior. Most people, even when tempted to do something wrong, experience an internal emotional resistance. That uncomfortable feeling, guilt, shame, empathy for potential harm, serves as a natural deterrent. Psychopaths don't have this mechanism. They can harm others without the emotional cost that would stop most people. This makes them capable of sustained, repeated,
escalating harmful behavior without the psychological toll it would take on typical individuals. Other consistently important traits include grandiose sense of self-worth and pathological lying. Psychopaths genuinely believe they're superior to others, smarter, more capable, more deserving. This grandiosity isn't compensating for hidden insecurity. It's genuine self-perception untempered by realistic self-assessment or social feedback. Combined with pathological lying, this creates individuals who construct elaborate false narratives about themselves and their accomplishments, then believe their fabrications. Shallow emotional responses mean that while psychopaths can display anger, frustration, or excitement, their emotional range is fundamentally limited. They don't experience the deep, complex emotions that characterize typical human experience: profound love, existential fear, genuine remorse, or emotional pain from loss. Their emotions are transient and superficial, flaring up and disappearing without the lasting impact emotions have for most people. Recognizing psychopaths in professional settings. The workplace represents perhaps the most common context where people encounter psychopaths and where the damage they cause ripples throughout entire organizations. Corporate psychopaths don't just harm individual colleagues, they poison organizational culture, destroy morale, drive away talented employees, and ultimately damage the company's bottom line and reputation. The first sign often appears during the hiring process. Psychopaths typically interview exceptionally well. They're charming, confident, and skilled at impression management. They know how to mirror the energy of the interviewer, say exactly what hiring managers want to hear, and present an idealized version of themselves that seems perfectly suited for the position. References might be glowing, because psychopaths are skilled at identifying who will speak positively about them and avoiding those who've seen through their mask. Once hired, a pattern emerges that researchers have documented repeatedly. Psychopaths present different versions of themselves to different people, a phenomenon called maintaining multiple personas. To superiors and those who can advance their careers, they're charming, competent, hardworking, and loyal. To peers who might compete with them, they're friendly but subtly undermining. To subordinates who pose no threat but can be exploited, they're often abusive, dismissive, or manipulative. This differential treatment is a key warning sign. If someone is consistently wonderful to management but rumored to be terrible to support staff, pay attention. If they treat the executive team with respect but are dismissive or cruel to administrative assistants, janitors, or junior employees, that's not just rudeness, it's strategic persona management. Psychopaths recognize power structures and adjust their behavior accordingly to maximize personal benefit. Public humiliation of subordinates represents another common pattern. Psychopaths may ridicule employees' work performance in meetings, dress down team members in front of colleagues, or engage in what appears to be disproportionate anger over minor issues. This isn't loss of control, it's deliberate intimidation designed to establish dominance and create an atmosphere of fear that prevents people from challenging them. The malicious spreading of lies and rumors serves multiple functions. It isolates potential threats, damages competitors' reputations, creates confusion and distrust among colleagues, and positions the psychopath as the trusted source of information. They might tell person A that person B said something negative about them, then tell person B that person A is upset with them, creating conflict between two people who were previously allies, neutralizing both as potential threats. Taking credit for others' work while blaming others for failures is virtually universal among workplace psychopaths. They position themselves near successful projects to claim credit if things go well, while distancing themselves from anything that might fail. When mistakes occur,
They rapidly shift responsibility to subordinates or colleagues, often with elaborate narratives about how they tried to prevent the problem but weren't listened to. A parasitic approach to resources is common. Psychopaths may claim disproportionate shares of credit, compensation, or resources relative to their actual contributions. They exploit colleagues' knowledge and skills without reciprocation, expecting others to help them while offering nothing genuine in return. They may delegate their work to others while taking the praise for results. The pattern extends to how they respond to accountability. When confronted with their behavior, workplace psychopaths employ several predictable strategies. They might deny the incident occurred, attack the credibility of the person raising concerns, claim they're being victimized by jealous colleagues, threaten legal action, or appeal to higher authorities they've cultivated relationships with. This response pattern, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender, protects them while simultaneously discrediting those who attempt to hold them accountable.
Identifying psychopaths in personal relationships. While workplace psychopaths cause enormous damage to organizations and careers, psychopaths in personal relationships, romantic partners, close friends, or family members, can devastate your mental health, financial security, and sense of reality itself. The relationship typically begins with what appears to be exceptional compatibility. The psychopath seems to share your interests, values, and worldview to an uncanny degree. They mirror your personality, agree with your opinions, and present themselves as your ideal match. This isn't coincidence, it's calculated assessment followed by strategic presentation. They've identified what you want and are providing exactly that image. Love bombing often characterizes the early phase of romantic relationships with psychopaths. They shower you with attention, gifts, and declarations of devotion that feel overwhelming but intoxicating. The relationship progresses at an intense pace. Talk of moving in together, marriage, or shared future plans emerges remarkably quickly, often within weeks or months. This rapid escalation isn't genuine passion, it's creating emotional investment and dependency before you have time to see their true nature. Once you're committed, emotionally, financially, or legally, the mask begins to slip. The charming person who seemed so attentive becomes increasingly critical, controlling, or cold. This transformation can be gradual or sudden, but it always leaves victims confused and desperate to recapture those early magical feelings. That's exactly the point. Creating nostalgia for the idealized beginning keeps you trying to fix the relationship rather than leaving it. Pathological lying extends to all aspects of the relationship. Psychopaths lie about where they've been, who they've seen, their financial situation, their past, their feelings, everything. The lies are often unnecessary, serving no obvious purpose, which is particularly confusing for partners. This is because lying comes so naturally to psychopaths that they do it reflexively, even when truth would be easier or more advantageous. Financial exploitation commonly emerges over time. The psychopath might borrow money with elaborate stories about temporary difficulties, access your accounts with promises to contribute equally, make shared investments that somehow only benefit them, or sabotage your career or education to increase your financial dependence on them. By the time you recognize the pattern, you may have lost substantial money or damaged your own financial stability. Emotional manipulation takes many forms. Gaslighting, making you doubt your own memory, perception, and sanity, is particularly common. They'll deny conversations that definitely occurred, insist you remember events wrong, trivialize your emotions by claiming you're too sensitive, or even suggest you need professional help for your confusion or paranoia. Over time, this erodes your confidence in your own judgment, making you increasingly dependent on their version of reality. Isolation from support networks typically accompanies emotional manipulation. The psychopath might express discomfort with your friends or family, create conflicts that make socializing awkward, monopolize your time so you can't maintain outside relationships, or gradually convince you that others don't have your best interests at heart, while positioning themselves as your only true ally. This isolation serves multiple functions. It removes outside perspectives that might help you see the abuse, increases your emotional dependence on them, and eliminates people who might help you leave. The hot and cold treatment creates what psychologists call trauma bonding. The psychopath alternates between cruelty and kindness unpredictably, generating intense anxiety about when the next blow will fall and profound relief when they're temporarily kind again. This intermittent reinforcement is psychologically more addictive than consistent positive treatment, which is why victims often find it harder to leave these relationships than healthier ones that simply aren't working. The most dangerous aspect: lack of growth or change. Perhaps the most important thing to understand about psychopaths is that they don't change. Unlike people with depression, anxiety, or even other personality disorders who may improve with therapy, medication, or life changes, psychopathy is remarkably stable across the lifespan. The traits that define a psychopath at 20 will still define them at 40, 60, and 80. This stability has profound implications. It means that waiting for them to mature, hoping they'll grow out of their behavior, or believing your love can change them is futile. It means that promises to change, claims they've seen the error of their ways, or temporary improvements in behavior are not genuine transformation. They're strategic adjustments to retain control or achieve specific goals. Research on treating psychopathy reveals why change is so unlikely. Traditional therapy, which relies on empathy, insight into how one's behavior affects others, and motivation to change for moral or relationship reasons, simply doesn't work with psychopaths. They don't feel empathy, so appeals to others' feelings fall flat. They don't believe their behavior is problematic. From their perspective, everyone else is simply too weak or stupid to play the game as well as they do. And they're not motivated to change because they're not suffering from their condition. In fact, some research suggests that therapy may actually make psychopaths more dangerous by teaching them more sophisticated manipulation techniques. They learn what therapists want to hear, how better to mimic remorse and empathy, and which vulnerabilities to target in others. They essentially receive training in human psychology without developing any genuine empathy or desire to change. Some studies show psychopaths who've undergone treatment actually have higher recidivism rates than untreated psychopaths. While this finding remains controversial and may reflect selection bias, perhaps the most severe cases are sent to treatment, it underscores an important reality. Psychopathy is not a condition that responds to conventional mental health interventions. The implications for relationships are stark. If you're involved with a psychopath, professionally or personally, waiting for them to change is not a viable strategy. Your choices are either to accept that this is who they are and will always be, implementing whatever protective measures you can while maintaining the relationship, or to exit the relationship entirely. There is no third option where they genuinely transform into a different person. Red flags, early warning signs. Identifying psychopaths early, before significant damage occurs, requires attention to specific behavioral patterns that emerge in initial interactions. While no single sign definitively indicates psychopathy, clusters of these warning signs should prompt serious caution. Too charming is the first red flag. If someone seems almost unnaturally charismatic, if conversations flow too smoothly, if they seem to know exactly what to say in every situation, be cautious. Genuine human interaction includes awkwardness, misunderstandings, and moments where people search for the right words. Psychopaths' practiced social skills can make interactions feel suspiciously perfect. Inconsistencies in their history or stories merit attention. Details that change between tellings, gaps in their narrative that they gloss over, vague references to past relationships or jobs without substance, or reluctance to introduce you to people from different parts of their life may indicate carefully constructed false personas. Psychopaths often compartmentalize their lives to prevent people from comparing notes and recognizing contradictions. The way they talk about previous partners, colleagues, or friends provides valuable information. If everyone in their past was terrible, all exes were crazy, all previous bosses were idiots, all former friends betrayed them, consider that the common denominator is them. While anyone can have a bad relationship or two, psychopaths leave consistent trails of burned bridges and blame everyone else for the pattern. Rapid escalation in relationships, whether romantic, friendship, or professional, should raise concerns. If someone wants to be your best friend after one conversation, discusses serious commitment after a few dates, or offers amazing opportunities shortly after meeting, ask yourself why. Legitimate relationships typically develop gradually as people build trust through consistent positive interactions over time. Superficial emotions can be subtle but telling. Pay attention to whether their emotional displays match the situation. Do they seem to experience emotions in a way that feels performative rather than genuine? Do their emotions shift rapidly without lingering effects? Can they cry without appearing truly sad, or rage without seeming genuinely angry once the outburst ends? These mismatches suggest emotional mimicry rather than authentic feeling. Boundary violations early in relationships.
Protecting yourself. Practical strategies. If you've identified a possible psychopath in your circle, several strategies can help protect you while you determine your next steps. Document everything becomes crucial when dealing with psychopaths. Keep copies of emails, text messages, and any written communication. Note dates, times, and details of conversations and incidents. Save evidence of their claims, promises, or threats. This documentation serves multiple purposes. It helps you trust your own memory when they gaslight you, provides evidence if you need to report them professionally or legally, and creates accountability they're not accustomed to facing. Maintain your support network despite their efforts to isolate you. Stay connected to friends, family, and colleagues who knew you before this relationship. These outside perspectives can help reality check your perceptions and provide support. Psychopaths work to isolate targets because isolation increases vulnerability. Maintaining connections disrupts their strategy. Set and enforce firm boundaries, understanding that psychopaths will test them relentlessly. Be clear, direct, and unyielding about your limits. Don't explain, justify, or defend your boundaries. Psychopaths will use your explanations as opportunities to argue, manipulate, or find loopholes. Simply state the boundary and consistently enforce consequences when it's violated. Avoid emotional engagement in conflicts with psychopaths. They don't argue to resolve issues or reach understanding. They argue to win, dominate, and destabilize you. Your anger, hurt, or frustration are weapons they can use against you. Practice gray rock technique. Become as boring and unreactive as possible. Give minimal responses, show no emotional reaction, and refuse to be drawn into drama. Consult professionals who understand psychopathy. Not all therapists, lawyers, or HR professionals recognize the dynamics of these relationships. Seek out specialists who have training in personality disorders, particularly those familiar with psychopathy. They can help you develop strategies, validate your experiences, and navigate exiting the relationship safely. If leaving is necessary, and it often is, plan carefully.
Psychopaths often escalate when they lose control, so the exit phase can be the most dangerous. Secure your finances, important documents, and valuables before announcing your intention to leave. Have a support system in place. Consider involving authorities or legal counsel if you anticipate threats or retaliation, and understand that they may attempt to draw you back with promises of change, temporary good behavior, or threats of harm to themselves or you. Psychopathy is not rare, with prevalence rates around 1% in the general population and significantly higher in corporate settings. Most of us will encounter psychopaths throughout our lives. The key is recognizing them before they can inflict serious damage. Remember that psychopathy is defined by specific clusters of traits: profound lack of empathy, manipulative behavior, absence of genuine remorse, superficial charm, grandiosity, pathological lying, and parasitic lifestyle. These aren't simply character flaws or bad behavior, they're manifestations of a fundamentally different psychological structure that doesn't respond to normal social feedback or moral reasoning. The good news is that knowledge provides protection. Understanding the tactics psychopaths use, the charm offensive, the multiple personas, the gaslighting, the strategic cruelty, makes you less vulnerable to them. Recognizing the warning signs early allows you to establish boundaries, maintain documentation, and avoid deep entanglement before serious harm occurs. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong about someone, despite their charming surface, if their behavior doesn't match their words, if you find yourself constantly confused or doubting your perceptions around them, take those feelings seriously. Your intuition is processing patterns your conscious mind hasn't fully articulated yet. Understand that you cannot save, fix, or change a psychopath. This limitation isn't a reflection of your inadequacy, it's the nature of the disorder. Psychopaths don't want to change, don't believe they need to change, and lack the emotional architecture necessary for genuine transformation. Accepting this reality, while painful, is essential for protecting yourself. If you discover you're already entangled with a psychopath, know that exiting the relationship is possible. It requires careful planning, strong support systems, and often professional assistance, but thousands of people have successfully extracted themselves from these relationships and rebuilt their lives. The damage they inflict can heal with time, therapy, and distance. Finally, don't let awareness of psychopathy create paranoia or cynicism about humanity. The vast majority of people, approximately 99%, are not psychopaths. Most humans experience genuine empathy, form authentic connections, and are capable of remorse and growth. Psychopaths are the exception, not the rule. The goal isn't to view everyone with suspicion, but to develop informed awareness that allows you to recognize the genuine exceptions when you encounter them. It's about protecting yourself from the small minority who pose real danger while remaining open to genuine connection with the vast majority who don't. Your mental health, your financial security, your career, and your sense of self are worth protecting. Understanding psychopathy and knowing how to identify psychopaths in your circle before it's too late isn't about judgment, it's about self-preservation. And that's not just acceptable, it's essential.